The path stretched ahead, long and crowded. She reached up and adjusted the brown Carton mask, ensuring not a single part of her face peeked through. The laughter began before she even passed the first group. "Monster girl," whispered one. A giggle followed, then another. The murmurs spread like ripples in a pond. She kept walking. Her grip on the books in her hands tightened. A small pebble struck her shoulder. Another brushed past her ankle. The sting of the third one barely made her flinch. "Say something," shouted a boy. "Does the monster talk?" The giggles turned into laughter. She kept her head down, her pace steady, her mask securely in place. At the gates, the voices faded. She walked into silence, the air heavy with unspoken stares. Inside, the teacher spoke sharply, her voice cutting through the whispers. "Enough of this nonsense. Open your books and pay attention." The murmurs stopped, but only for a moment. The teacher turned and asked gently, "Why not take the mask off?" The girl shook her head, firm, steady, final. She walked to the back of the room, ignoring the curious eyes that followed her. The lesson began, numbers and words filling the air. Then, a sudden crash shattered the calm. Glass sprayed across the room. A bird darted in, wings flailing, its cries sharp and desperate. It landed awkwardly on the desk, one wing hanging limp, a shiny object clutched tightly in its claws. Gasps echoed. Students leaned back in their seats, whispering about bad omens and curses. She stood. While others sat frozen in fear, she stepped forward. The bird trembled as her hands cupped it gently. Its feathers were soft but broken, its tiny eyes pleading. A faint voice, barely more than a breath, reached her ears. "Your truth will set you free." Her fingers brushed against the bird's claws. The shiny object, a small bead, glowed faintly as it slipped into her palm. She stared at it, her heart pounding. She quickly hid the bead in her pocket and stepped back. The bird flapped its injured wing and rose, circling the room once before vanishing through the broken window. The room buzzed with murmurs. "What was it? Did you see the light?" "It's a sign." She said nothing. Her hands stayed steady on her desk, but her mind swirled with questions. The glow, the words, the bird. It all seemed to pull at something deep inside her. The whispers around her grew louder, but she kept her gaze low, her thoughts racing. Somewhere, in the quiet of her pocket, the bead felt warm against her fingers. The day always began the same way. A firm voice echoed through the house, sharp and unwavering. "Never take off the mask. The family's honor depends on it." The warning wasn't new, but it sat heavy every time it came. She nodded, clutching her books, her fingers brushing against the edges of the mask. In the corner of the room stood a cracked mirror. She caught a glimpse of her reflection, just enough to see the dull brown Carton that hid her face. The questions came again, as they always did. What could be so terrible? What made her so cursed? Her hands hesitated over the string tied behind her head, but the voice in her memory stopped her. "Don't. Never." She dropped her hands. At night, whispers crept through the walls, clutching something small and golden in her hands, muttering words too faint to understand. Her gaze flickered toward a shadowy corner, her lips moving as if in prayer. It wasn't fear of the dark. It was something deeper, something hidden. The notebook was the only thing that brought comfort. Its pages were worn, the edges frayed from years of being read and reread. Her mother's handwriting curved across the pages, unfinished tales waiting for an ending. Magical lands, brave heroes, secrets waiting to be discovered. Under the faint light of the moon, her own voice trembled as she added to the stories. Her words filled the silence, weaving dreams of a life where masks weren't needed. "One day," she whispered to herself, "they'll listen to me. They'll hear my stories. You'll be the best storyteller they've ever known." The words came from the boy who always seemed to believe in her, his grin wide and bright. "You don't need the mask." She didn't respond, only shaking her head, the same way she always did. The schoolyard was a place of sharp words and cruel laughter. A girl with a radiant smile strode confidently, her charm masking the sharpness of her tongue. Rumors were her weapon, and today she wielded them with precision. If you see her face, you'll turn to stone. The laughter erupted around her, each word cutting deeper than the last. The boy's voice rose above the noise. "She's braver than any of you." The crowd only laughed harder. Alone under the shade of an ancient tree, she ate in silence. The mask grew damp as tears slipped beneath it, hidden from the world. A pair of watchful eyes noticed. The teacher sighed, her heart heavy, but her hands tied. No matter how she tried, the charm of the loudest girl always blinded the others. The voice that carried sharp whispers now softened, false kindness dripping from each word. "Are you all right?" The question hung in the air, its sweetness masking the bitterness beneath. The smile remained fixed, even as cruel words slipped into the silence. Her hands clenched tightly, her nails digging into her palm. The small bead hidden there began to warm. It glowed faintly, a soft pulse that matched the rhythm of her anger. Her thoughts raced back to the stories. Her mother had spoken of objects filled with magic, of truths waiting to be revealed. The bead seemed alive, a small spark of something larger. Her voice broke the silence that evening. Her gaze lingered on the bead, her tone stern and unyielding. "Don't meddle with things you don't understand." Across the schoolyard, sharp eyes watched and listened. The boy's voice carried over the chatter. "You're stronger than all of them." The words sparked something different, not in the girl with the mask, but in the one who thrived on attention. The bead pulsed again, stronger this time. She noticed it glowed brightest when her emotions surged, when pain cut deep or anger flared hot. Her thoughts drifted to the notebook, to a story her mother had never finished. It spoke of a cursed child, trapped in lies, who found freedom through a truth only they could uncover. The bead, the mask, the whispers, they all felt connected. The questions grew louder, the answers still just out of reach. The schoolyard buzzed with laughter as Adama sauntered up to the girl, her smirk wide, her eyes sharp like a hawk ready to strike. She blocked her path, hands on her hips. "Take off the mask, monster girl, or are you too scared?" A hush fell over the crowd. Eyes shifted between them, waiting. The girl's grip on her books tightened, her heart pounding, but she said nothing. Her voice came steady, calm. "What I hide is none of your business." Adama's laughter echoed through the yard, cruel and mocking. "None of our business? You're a joke, hiding behind that thing. What's the matter? Scared of showing us your face?" The crowd erupted in a chorus of jeers. "Monster!" someone yelled. "Scaredy cat!" came another taunt. Adama led them all, her voice sharp, cutting deep. The boy who always stood by her side, the one who never backed down, stepped forward. His voice rang out over the noise, firm and strong. "Leave her alone." The laughter didn't stop, but the boy's words cut through it, a shield between the girl and the world that mocked her. Still, the cruel laughter clung to her heart. She clutched her books tighter, her head held low. Later, beneath the shade of a baobab tree, the girl's hands trembled as she whispered to herself, "Why do I keep hiding? Why do I let them hurt me?" A shadow appeared beside her. The boy's voice was soft but unwavering. "You don't owe them anything." His words wrapped around her like a comfort. "But you deserve to know the truth." Her gaze fell to the mask, her fingers brushing its edge. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to understand, to find the strength to face the world, but doubt still gnawed at her. That night, the bead in her hand glowed brighter than it ever had before. A vision flashed before her eyes, flames licking the walls, the smell of smoke thick in the air. Her mother's voice pierced through the roar of fire, desperate and urgent. "Stay behind me!" The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving her breathless. She touched her face, her fingers tracing the edges of the scar. "My scars," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "They're from that fire." The next morning, her aunt stormed into her room, fury burning in her eyes. She caught sight of the bead glowing softly in the girl's hand. "Where did you get this?" The girl flinched, but before she could answer, the bead was snatched from her grasp. "Forget this nonsense," the older woman snapped, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what you're playing with." "No, Auntie, it's connected to my mother." The girl's protest rang in the air, but her aunt's stern silence filled the room. Without another word, the door slammed shut. That night, the world outside her window was quiet, save for a soft chirp. She turned toward the sound, her eyes widening when she saw the injured bird on the sill. "You're back," she whispered, kneeling beside the bird. To her surprise, the bird tilted its head and spoke, its voice low and gentle. "Find the tree of truth. Your mother knew its power. It holds your answers." Her heart raced. "Where is it? How do I find it?" The bird's eyes sparkled in the moonlight. "Follow your heart. The tree will call you when the time is right." With that, the bird fluttered away into the night, leaving the girl staring after it, a spark of hope flickering in her chest. She ran to the boy the next morning, her eyes filled with a new determination. "I have to go. I need to know the truth." Without hesitation, the boy nodded, his loyalty unwavering. "Then I'm going with you. You're not doing this alone." Under the cover of darkness, they packed quietly. With the bead hidden in her pocket, the girl glanced at the door one last time before slipping out of the village, her heart thumping in her chest. They moved swiftly, feet silent on the ground as they made their way into the forest, but they weren't alone. In the shadows, 3 figures crept behind them, their eyes sharp, their movements swift. Adama had overheard everything. She smirked, whispering to her friends, "Let's see what you're hiding." The girl and the boy moved deeper into the forest, unaware of the eyes following them, just out of sight. The bead in her hand pulsed faintly, a soft glow in the dark. Adama and her friends watched from behind the trees, waiting. The girl and the boy were headed straight toward the unknown, their path leading them into the heart of the forest. Adama's voice was a whisper, her smile cold and cunning. "We'll wait for the perfect moment." The girl's steps faltered for a moment as she felt the weight of eyes on her, but she shook off the feeling, pressing forward. The bead pulsed stronger in her hand, as if urging her onward. The forest whispered with secrets, and the girl and the boy moved deeper into the unknown, unaware of the dangers that lay ahead. The shadows grew longer, and the night seemed to stretch on forever. But with every step, the girl felt the truth drawing closer, just beyond her reach. And with that, the journey truly began. The bead's glow led them deeper into the forest, the light flickering like a beacon in the dark. As Zuri and Kofi moved forward, the air grew thick with mystery, and fireflies swirled around them, their lights dancing in the night. The towering tree ahead beckoned them, its presence strong and ancient. The bead pulsed brighter, drawing them closer. As they approached, a deep voice echoed from the tree. "Why have you come?" Zuri's heart raced as she stepped closer, the words trembling in her chest. "I want to know who I am, and why my scars make me afraid." The tree's voice rumbled, its branches shaking as if in sorrow. "Your scars are marks of love. Your mother saved you from the flames of envy." Zuri's hands tightened around the bead as the tree continued. "The mask hides you, not because of shame, but because fear lingers in your family's shadow." A sharp laugh sliced through the moment, and from the shadows, Adama and her friends emerged. "Still hiding behind that mask?" Adama sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. The crowd behind her snickered, their eyes locked on the girl. Adama took a step forward, a smirk curling on her lips. "Let's see the monster underneath," she shouted, lunging at Zuri, reaching for the mask. Before she could touch it, the bead flared to life, glowing with such power that it created a shimmering shield around Zuri and Kofi. Adama and her friends were thrown back, stumbling to the ground, stunned. The tree's voice echoed, deep and unwavering. "You, Adama," it boomed, "hide a greater shame than any mask could cover." Adama's eyes widened in confusion. She turned to her friends, but they were silent, unsure of what was happening. The tree spoke again, this time revealing Adama's darkest secret. "Your father's wealth comes from exploiting the poor villagers of your land. That is the truth you fear to face." Adama's face turned pale. She staggered back, her breath shallow. "It wasn't my fault," she cried out, falling to her knees. "I didn't choose this life." The beads around Zuri's neck began to glow brighter, absorbing the weight of the truth. A light so powerful filled the air that everyone shielded their eyes. The light intensified, pulsing, swirling between Zuri and Adama. In a flash, Zuri's scars transformed. They shifted, glowing like intricate patterns etched into her skin, each one telling a story of pain, of love, of resilience. They were no longer marks of shame. but a badge of strength, like tattoos of a storyteller's craft. Zuri stood tall, feeling a surge of energy. Her body felt lighter, freer. The mask in her hand felt insignificant now. The tree's voice was soft, yet firm. You carry your mother's gift. Use it to inspire, not hide. Zuri took a deep breath, her chest rising with newfound strength. She turned to Adama, her voice steady. We all have pain, but we can choose to do better. Adama stared at her, tears in her eyes, but there was no defiance in her anymore, only a deep, aching sadness. Zuri stepped forward, holding the mask in her hands. You can choose to be better too, she said. We all can. With that, the light from the bead began to fade, but Zuri's scars remained glowing brightly, a testament to the truth she had embraced. And in that moment, the weight of her past, her fears, and her pain had been transformed into the strength of her future. The tree, ancient and wise, rustled its leaves as though in approval, and Zuri, with Kofi by her side, stepped forward into the future, stronger, bolder, and ready to face whatever came next. Zuri stepped into the school courtyard, her heart pounding with anticipation. The sunlight hit her glowing patterns, casting soft, shimmering light on the ground. Her scars, no longer hidden behind a mask, told a story of strength, resilience, and love. She could feel the eyes of the students on her. They were silent, staring in awe. Whispers filled the air, murmuring from one group to another, until one brave voice broke the quiet. She's beautiful. Zuri stood tall, her chest proud, her gaze steady. The voices of the students faded into the background as she spoke. These marks tell my story, and I'm proud of them, she declared, her voice clear and strong. Her words echoed in the courtyard. Some students smiled, some were still in disbelief, but all were moved. The mask was gone. Zuri was free. Adama watched from a distance, her eyes searching for Zuri's. The guilt weighed heavily on her heart. She could no longer hide from the truth of her actions. Taking a deep breath, Adama walked toward Zuri, her hands trembling. I'm sorry for everything I've done, she said, her voice filled with regret. Zuri looked at her, the bitterness of the past fading away with each passing second. She smiled and extended her hand, her eyes filled with understanding. Let's start fresh, she said. Adama nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She took Zuri's hand, and in that simple gesture, the walls between them began to crumble. In the classroom, Miss Olamide stood at the front, her eyes on Zuri. Courage isn't about hiding, she said, her voice firm but gentle. It's about showing the world who you truly are. The class sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the lesson. Then, one by one, the students began to speak. Some shared their own fears, others their scars, but all of them opened up, inspired by the courage that Zuri had shown. Laughter filled the room, not of mockery, but of understanding and support. Zuri felt a warmth inside as the classroom transformed into a space of acceptance. At home, Auntie Udo sat with Zuri in the quiet of their living room, her hands gripping Zuri's tightly. I made you hide because I was scared, Auntie Udo confessed, her voice breaking. I was afraid of what the world might do to you, just like it did to your mother. Zuri listened carefully, her heart softening with each word. Auntie Udo continued, her voice filled with sorrow. Your mother's bravery saved you, but I didn't know how to protect you the same way. She paused, her gaze meeting Zuri's. But now, I know this. I won't let fear stop you anymore. Zuri reached out and gently placed her hand on Auntie Udo's. I'm not afraid anymore, Auntie. I have the strength to face what comes next. Auntie Udo smiled, her eyes filled with pride. I always knew you were strong, Zuri. The next day, Zuri stood before her classmates, a new sense of purpose in her heart. She began to share her stories, the ones her mother had passed down, the ones that were now part of her. Her glowing patterns, like threads of wisdom and love, became a symbol of pride, not just for her, but for everyone who saw them. Each story she shared, each truth she embraced, rippled out into the world, inspiring others to stand tall in the face of their own challenges. As time went on, more and more people in the community began to speak their truths, no longer hiding behind fear or shame. Zuri's courage had sparked a movement, a change that could not be undone. The stories she told became the stories of the people, and together they began to heal. Zuri's journey was not just her own anymore. It had become the journey of everyone who had once hidden their scars, their pain, their truth. And as she stood in the center of it all, she knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, a story that would continue for generations to come. Zuri had embraced her gift, and with that, she had given the world a gift in return, the courage to be who they truly were. Under the grand branches of the Tree of Truth, the villagers gathered, both young and old, their eyes wide with anticipation. The tree's leaves shimmered softly, casting a warm glow on the crowd. Silence fell, and all waited for the voice that would speak of courage and wisdom. Zuri stood tall before them, her presence strong and steady. Her voice rang out, warm and full of strength. "Let me tell you a story about courage and truth," she began, her words wrapping around the listeners like the embrace of a loved one. The crowd leaned in, eager to hear. Zuri spoke of a time when fear hid the beauty of the world. She told of a heart closed by pain, a soul too scared to face what lay within. But then, she said, forgiveness came like a gentle wind, breaking down the walls that had built up inside. It was bravery, real bravery, that sparked a change. As Zuri spoke, the villagers nodded, murmuring in agreement. Each word seemed to touch something deep inside them. They saw their own fears, their own scars in Zuri's story, and they saw hope, hope that they too could overcome. Fear builds walls, but truth tears them down. The glowing tree stood tall behind Zuri, its light a symbol of the journey she had begun. It reminded them all that their own stories too could shine brightly if only they had the courage to share them.